Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack the very concept of peace, and we're scaling it all the way from your personal morning routine right up to global geopolitics. You know, we usually think of peace as this fundamental, universal human right, but what if it's actually a heavily commodified luxury? Let's dive in and find out. Okay, let's jump right into the modern wellness movement. Just listen to this quote from wellness coach Marissa Lewis. She basically frames inner peace as a personal lifestyle choice, something you can simply manifest, or as she says, dilute with breath. It's an entire industry that defines success through super clean aesthetics and early morning routines, completely framing calm as this individual mental exercise you just have to choose to do.
But wow, there is a stark contrast here when you look at the big picture. While the wellness movement is out there telling you to just breathe through your anxiety, academic and sociological texts reveal a much harsher economic reality. Systemic financial precarity literally inhibits a person's physical capacity to take those calming breaths. It turns what is marketed as a universal spiritual exercise into a premium lifestyle product. Basically, it's reserved strictly for those who can actually afford the space and time to think.
So what does this all mean? Well, for the lower socioeconomic strata, peace isn't a structural default at all. Instead, it operates as this exhausting psychological defense mechanism, a cope, if you will, that is absolutely necessary just to survive environments that are structurally designed to produce stress. Our sources even point to online subcultures like the Black Pill movement. It's a deeply fatalistic worldview, and it really highlights how unchangeable factors like physical appearance or chronic illness create this deep sense of existential exclusion that mere positive thinking just cannot fix.
Section 1. The luxury of calm.
When you dig into the data, you see that wealthy individuals actually enjoy a baseline of safety that naturally defaults to peace. The poor, meanwhile, have to constantly struggle. And this illustrates something wild. Even strict philosophical pacifism is a privilege. Choosing to practice absolute nonviolence or preferring martyrdom over self-defense, which is a debate you'll see in Quaker forums, implies that you already have a privileged baseline of physical safety. For marginalized groups, protesting a violent system often results in immediate, very real retaliation. Think about that for a second. Even the choice to be a strict pacifist requires a safety net.
And you know, this struggle isn't just theoretical. It's beautifully captured in literature. Post-colonial authors like R.K. Narayan and Aravind Adiga explored this incredibly difficult search for just fleeting moments of peace amidst the crushing structural weight and sheer adversity of colonial rule. Genuine contentment is highly unequal when your daily life is focused entirely on survival.
Section 2. Negative versus positive peace. All right, let's zoom out a bit. Have you ever heard of Johan Galtung? He completely revolutionized peace and conflict studies by recognizing that violence isn't just a physical attack. He actually coined the term structural violence. This is violence built right into our social, economic, and political systems, things like systemic poverty, racism, and discrimination. These structures deny basic human needs and actively limit human potential. So true harmony is completely impossible, even if there are absolutely no bullets flying. To really hammer this home, Galtung used a brilliant health analogy. Negative peace is merely the absence of direct violence. It's like negative health, just the absence of active disease symptoms. You aren't sick, but you aren't exactly thriving, right? Positive peace, however, requires the total integration of society and the total absence of structural violence. It's like positive health, a state of overall societal wellness and the robust capacity to resist the disease of conflict entirely. So, to achieve that true positive peace, Galtung argued that society literally has to overcome 3 distinct slices of a very toxic pie. We have to eliminate direct violence, we absolutely have to dismantle structural violence, and crucially, we must overcome cultural violence. That includes the aspects of culture, religion, or ideology that are specifically used to legitimize those other 2 forms of violence. It's the whole shebang.
Which brings us to Section 3. The Western Peace Bubble.
Think about this. For over 78 years, the post-World War II Western world has basically lived in an affluent bubble. Here, peace is treated as a default right for self-expression. But this long-term insulation kind of blinds people to the reality of the global South. For millions of people outside that bubble, violent conflict, systemic deprivation, and state fragility are the normal baseline. In many parts of the world, war is normal, and peace is the incredibly rare privilege. And when we ignore that baseline, we're basically ignoring history. Take a look at this number, 750,000. That represents the Palestinians displaced during the 1948 Nakba.
It serves as a really stark reminder from our sources that dominant, liberal peace frameworks often ignore foundational historical injustices and the true root causes of conflict, strongly favoring temporary political expediency and the management of violence over actual, lasting resolution.
Section 4. The business of peace building. So how does the international community actually try to fix all this? Well, the dominant global approach right now is called the Liberal Peace Project. It basically attempts to replicate Western liberal democratic capitalist states globally. But this project comes with some massive contradictions. It forces rapid market privatization and deep cuts to public spending on really vulnerable nations. Critical economists argue this actually increases poverty, drives populations into shadow economies, and ultimately just renews the conflict.
And honestly, this leads to a pretty alarming commercialization of peacekeeping. Because of the Liberal Peace Project, there's this heavy reliance on private military organizations like the Wagner Group. Now, these groups operate in massive legal gray zones. Since their super lucrative contracts depend on instability, actual conflict resolution becomes financially counterproductive to their corporate interests. We literally shift from seeking peace to prioritizing perpetual conflict management.
To make matters even more complicated, the actual international institutions tasked with maintaining peace suffer from really deep structural imbalances. Western stability often directly relies on neo-colonial resource extraction from the global south. And at the very top, the UN Security Council is totally paralyzed. The absolute veto power of its 5 permanent members routinely blocks multilateral action just to protect their own national interests. It leaves the UN completely deadlocked during escalating global crises.
Let's shift gears to Section 5, Decolonizing the Peace Narrative. Okay, so this brings us to an alternative concept, decolonial peace. Decolonial theory basically asserts that the mainstream liberal peace model we just talked about is actually a colonial product that normalizes Western ideologies. Decolonial peace demands that genuine harmony requires historical justice, dismantling neocolonial structures, and actually listening to indigenous epistemologies, meaning indigenous ways of knowing and understanding the world. It frames resistance not as a threat to order, but as an absolutely necessary prerequisite for reclaiming humanity.
The contrast between these two approaches is just incredibly stark. State-centric state building relies on external institutions to impose standardized, top-down models, simply to stabilize state structures. In contrast, localized peace formation empowers indigenous agents and community leaders to build organic bottom-up solutions that specifically target the true root causes of conflict, like social justice and resource distribution.
And the best part? We know this bottom-up approach works. Real academic research, such as studies published on peace journalism in the fragile regions of Nigeria, proves that these localized, solution-focused initiatives are highly effective. By focusing on root causes and deconstructing state propaganda, localized peace networks become vital prerequisites for actually transforming conflict and achieving true structural peace.
Now, even when there are progressive steps at the top, they really struggle to match this local efficacy. Take the UN's new Agenda for Peace. It rightly identifies structural inequality as a direct threat to global peace, but it suffers from what academics call the sovereignty contradiction. Basically, it demands that marginalized states fix their own conflicts and build peace, all while the global capitalist system continues to limit their political agency and extract their wealth.
So, what's the bottom line here? To rescue peace from just being a luxury of the rich, our sources suggest we absolutely must radically transform global structures. We have to dismantle the commercial financial incentives of war and private military groups. We must reform the UN Security Council to eliminate these massive power concentrations. And most importantly, we need to center subaltern, or socially and politically marginalized, localized peace formation over top-down Eurocentric engineering.
I'm going to leave you with this final thought, just to help reevaluate your own positionality in the world. Look at your daily life. Is the peace you experience a fundamental, universal human right, or is it actually a heavily guarded privilege sustained by global inequality and the struggles of others? It's a heavy question, no doubt, but an absolutely essential one to ask if we ever want to achieve true societal wellness. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the structures around you.